So to take the next step in my journey as a coffee nerd, for Christmas, my parents got me the Baymore 2000 AB Plus home coffee roaster. That's right, gonna be doing my own roasting. There's the roasting drum inside of the machine. And there's a chaff tray that slides underneath that. Put the beans in, do some programming, and you roast them up. The roaster came with a quite nice and varied selection of green coffee from Sweet Maria's. For my first roast, going with this one. So here we have the beans in a little mason jar here. After the initial roast, looks like they've come out maybe like a medium light, like on the low end of city, as it's sometimes called, which is about how I tend to like my coffee roasted. Although for some beans, they perhaps should be roasted a little darker. So I guess we'll see what we get out of these when I brew them in a couple of days. Got to give them a little time to let off some of that gas. So they'll degas for a couple of days. I'll brew it, and then we'll see how that went. Well, roasted coffee and brewed coffee don't necessarily taste and smell the same. But if this tastes half as good as it smells, it's gonna taste pretty darn good. While the coffee is finishing cooling, let me just talk about the actual coffee itself for a minute. This coffee was grown in Chiapas State in southern Mexico. The farms average about 1,500 meters above sea level. It's a good kind of mid-range, higher altitude there. The varietals are bourbon, Caturra, Typica, and Catuai, so a nice mix of kind of some of the major varietals. And it's pretty close to the border with Guatemala, that area of Mexico. So, you know, kind of classic coffee growing region, Guatemala, and you are right there. So similar kind of climate, I think, to those Guatemalan highlands. You have some cloud forests there in that part of Mexico, the Sierra Madre de Chiapas mountains, and you're pretty close to the Pacific Ocean, so some of those ocean breezes maybe kind of coming onshore into the mountains, helping with the moisture. You know, good for the coffee to have some of that moisture there. So this apparently leads to a number of microclimates, and of course that is good for coffee as well, as we know from Panama. So, hoping that this is going to be pretty good. Smelled good, looked pretty good. Like I think I said before, this came out, I'd say, probably medium light roast, and maybe I would have roasted it a little darker. I might have roasted this all the way to medium, but first time, kind of worried about burning the beans. Don't want to do that, and so I don't think we got even close to that happening. But yeah, let's find out how this turned out. The very first home roasting experience. I filled this pretty high, so let's be careful. Still on the warm side. Good start though. Nice little acid pop, and then so far some pretty classic flavors. It's not roasty as such, but kind of a like a toasted cereal kind of flavor, and then it's a bit chocolatey. So I think that's kind of a flavor profile that a lot of people expect out of coffee. I would say I'm getting more and more used to having very fruity coffees with more of a floral taste, but a good classic chocolatey cup profile is always welcome, I would say, as long as it's not overly kind of roasty and dark. I'm trying to think of how I would characterize the acidity. Usually, of course, it gets compared to a fruit of some type. And it's got a nice little pop, but it's not really citric, I don't feel like. I'm leaning towards something a little, milder, I guess, as far as acid goes. Citrus fruits, of course, kind of known for the acid, citric acid. This is definitely not that intense. So it makes me think of something else. I almost want to say like an apple, maybe. But that would be interesting. I don't know that I've ever really thought of an apple acidity before in any coffee that I've had. Maybe like a melon, but I kind of want to stick with apple. And the reason I kind of want to stick with apple is because then there's this kind of chocolatey note and a little bit of like a vaguely caramelized sweetness. And so it's sort of like a chocolate candy apple, which is sort of a fun comparison to have. Yeah, kind of like a Granny Smith apple in a way. It's not a perfect comparison, but this is all kind of subjective. In a way, you could sort of roll the whole thing together, like candy apple, kind of chocolate covered, and then you kind of have some like toasted peanuts kind of rolled in that. You've seen these things. The apple with the chopped nuts on the outside. All those flavors are sort of there. Again, the apple I don't think is a perfect comp, but definitely some chocolate notes, definitely some kind of toasted grain or nut notes. A bit of that sweetness. This one, as much as I'm enjoying it black, if you like dairy in coffee, this would be a great one to put a little bit of dairy in, because I find that there are coffees that are particularly sweet in a way that just pairs beautifully with that milk. A coffee that's really like kind of bright and fruity, I want to drink that black. A coffee that's very delicate, I want to drink that black. This one, I think a little more robust body, so it would stand up to milk or a little bit of cream. But also just the way that the flavors are, so that kind of chocolatey and caramel, like that pairs really well with milk. I think if you put a little bit of milk in this, I don't have any in the house to test it out because I've been drinking my coffee solely black for at least 6 months now. But I think if you put a little bit of half and half or milk or cream, kind of whatever your favorite is, I think you would get a cup of coffee where you'd be like, wow, this is, like drinking a chocolate milkshake almost. And I mean, maybe that's not what you look for in your morning cup of coffee, in which case, okay. But I mean, I think flavor wise, it would just be like, wow, this is like super sweet and creamy and just delicious. But again, even without the dairy, this is a pretty sweet cup of coffee, a pretty chocolatey cup of coffee, and a pretty good kind of creamy body. I mean, I almost feel like I must have roasted this a little more towards medium, even though it kind of looked medium light and it didn't spend like a ton of time in the roaster, but the heat was higher. So, I used, so there are 5 presets that the Baymore recommends for when you first start roasting. Get a sense for what it looks like when coffee is roasted at certain temperatures and rates before you start trying to fiddle with it manually. So it's a very user-friendly machine right out of the box because you can just kind of, it's not set it and forget it because you need to stand there the whole time. They are very clear about that, and you should anyway. But from the standpoint of needing to really keep an eye on the temperature gauge and really staring at the numbers, you don't need to do that. From that standpoint, it's set it and forget it. So I used P2, which was recommended for the lighter of the two kind of harder beans. So these are strictly high-grown beans, the Central American beans, grown at altitude. The bean density, they're harder, so they kind of need the higher, faster heat, is my understanding. So P1 is the kind of hottest, fastest profile, and then P2 is, it kind of goes up as fast, but it does drop a little bit later as far as the power level. So the heat not quite as intense, but I mean, the roaster did these beans very evenly. I mean, I didn't see any that looked like under roasted, undercolored. And it certainly came out just absolutely delicious. So that is, I would say, a pretty big success for number one. I mean, I was anticipating, one of the things that scared me off of home roasting for a long time was it's going to take me too long to get good at it and to produce decent coffee. And so why am I going to spend time like charring beans and making them undrinkable when I can just go buy coffee that I know is going to be great? But I mean, with this result, and granted, when I was looking at doing it for myself, I was not necessarily looking at the Baymore, which is a little more expensive than I would personally have spent on myself. So again, thank you to my parents for purchasing this for me for Christmas. But yeah, it was something that I was worried about as far as, is this going to be kind of worth the effort? How long is it going to take me to get good enough at this to be, satisfied? I'm satisfied already. This is delicious. And, I think most of the credit, all the credit really probably has to go to the machine and the development of the machine and the fact that it, a lot of thought clearly went into these heat profiles and everything. But the point is, you cannot argue with the results, or at least I cannot argue with the results because I'm sitting here drinking it. And this is a great cup of coffee. This is as good of a cup of coffee as I have had in the last few months, I think. I mean, since I had a Papua New Guinea from Doma Coffee in Idaho, which was the last 10 I think I handed out. not sure I'd give this a 10, but this is a strong 9. This is excellent. I mean, you know, nothing unpleasant in there. It is getting a little more, maybe a little more savory as it cools, but that's okay. That's not too bad. And just, you know, finish it before it cools. But, I mean, even with that note in there, this is still a 9 out of 10 easy. And, yeah, really, really good. So that's experiment number 1 with the roaster. Now I've got 8 pounds of, well, 7 3/4 pounds of green coffee still to work with from all over the world. So lots more experiments forthcoming, and I will document some of them here, probably not all of them, but yeah, I'm looking forward to it now. I mean, I was a little worried. I'm not too worried now. I mean, I guess I'm a little worried about when I start trying to maybe take a little more manual control of the roast, kind of how long it takes me to figure that part out. But the good news is, if I don't get great at it, there's a good fallback to the automatic profiles, because P2 with the Mexican beans ruled. That's it for this episode of Rob's Coffee Journeys, the Home Roasting Experience Volume 1. Quite successful, if I do say so myself, and I do. I'm probably not going to buy much in the way of coffee, roasted by somebody else anyway, for quite some time, but I do have the Paradise Roasters Rare Coffee subscription that still comes every 2 weeks. So if anything particularly interesting comes through in that subscription, I will probably do it on this channel. If not, then look for more of the home roasting experience as I kind of work through the process and maybe start to try to get a little more manual with it, and we'll see how that goes. But yeah, until next time, I'm going to finish this excellent cup of coffee, and I'll see you later.